Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. During the October 23rd COVID-19 press conference, Monroe County Health Administrator Penny Caudill said a COVID positivity rate increase was detected in Monroe County.
Locally today, our positivity rate was 3.7%. And while that may seem low, that is an increase and a bigger increase than we've seen. In the past week, we have hovered around that 3% mark, and 3.7 is a bigger increase. Now, in looking at that, we've had some days where the positivity rate for that particular day was higher than normal, and that will help drive some of those individual numbers. But we should not think that this virus is not in our community, because it is.
However, Caudill said a 10% positivity rate is present in most surrounding counties. She mentioned travel over county lines could carry the virus. She said most transmission occurs in social gatherings.
What we are not seeing cases transmitted in the classrooms. We are seeing cases spread through social gatherings, people, and not necessarily large social gatherings, but people letting their guard down. And this really isn't the time to do that. We have the power to change things and to keep our numbers lower and to keep them lowering as opposed to rising.
Caudill also reiterated the importance of flu vaccinations. President of Indiana University Health South Central Region, Brian Shockney, described a restriction in hospital visitor policies.
On Tuesday, we announced that we are moving back to not full guidelines of no visitors, but to a little more restricted in our guidelines. And so this change is due to the positive numbers of COVID-19 in the area. So only one visitor per patient will be allowed per day, per 24-hour period. We've been allowing one visitor, but that visitor could rotate. That is no longer the case because it poses too much of a risk to our patients, our team members, and our community.
Shockney reminded the community to regularly clean or dispose of their face coverings. The Ellettsville Town Council approved the creation of a Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act fund for payroll reimbursement. Clerk Treasurer Sandra Hash spoke during their October 26th meeting.
The CARES grant started out to pay for PPE and any expenses we incurred, but for whatever reason, the rules changed, and they said it was to reimburse for our public safety work that had to work during the shutdown.
Hash said the total amount was approximately $216,000 and that the fund would be temporary. The Bloomington Utilities Service Board discussed an amendment to the agreement with Greeley and Hansen for the Dillman Wastewater Treatment Plant Capacity Expansion Project. Assistant Director of Engineering Brad Schrader presented the $1,116,000 amendment during their October 26th meeting.
First is we had to extend the schedule of the construction by 10 months. So originally it was to be a year-and-a-half project, and it's gone to 2.5 years. And the primary reason was during the process right before going to bid, the feedback that Greeley and Hansen was getting from the contractors was that electrical equipment has a very long lead time right now, and so it's hard to get a lot of the electrical equipment. And then also just the pure construction phasing of the project to keep the plant running while they do all this work was going to be difficult, and they felt they could all the contractors could save us money by extending the contract by 10 months.
Schrader said the other change was in electoral design complexity in order to manage 480 volts. Board member Amanda Burnham questioned if the project should be rebid with such a large amendment cost. Schrader said engineering services are not bid items.
These are engineering services, so we don't bid out these type of services. These are services that we select on a qualification-based process, and then we hire, and then we pay generally what it costs them to do the work. So it's a time and material kind of function. So generally on a bidded contract, we are limited to amount of change orders. We really can't go beyond 25% of a bidded contract construction work on a change order, but this is not that. This is engineering services.
The board unanimously approved the amendment. Monroe County Community Schools Assistant Superintendent Dr. Markay Winston presented a Supporting the Whole Child update during the October 27th school board meeting. She mentioned the need for heightened mental health responsiveness due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Whole Child Support System is a framework that we are using to strengthen our ability to be responsive to all of the needs of our students. That means the academic needs, the behavioral needs, the social emotional needs, their physical health needs, their hunger needs, their needs for mental health, all aligned through a lens of equity.
Winston said every MCCSC school has implemented the Whole Child program. Family Case Manager Supervisor Byron Turner of the Indiana Department of Child Services said reports of child abuse have dropped by 43%.
Teachers, administrators, social workers, counselors, and other school staff are our community's best assets for recognizing and reporting child abuse and neglect. From February 2020 to April 2020, our regional area, which consists of Monroe, Brown, Morgan, Owen, and Lawrence counties, experienced a 43% drop in reports of child abuse and neglect. The drop in reports were unprecedented and directly correlated to schools being shut down early this year.
Turner said that the case managers have also seen an increase in mental health needs for children.
At this moment, the state of Indiana retains custody of roughly 1 out of every 50 MCCSC students. Caring for so many of our community students provides us with a level of insight that can't quite be quantified. Case managers have seen what appears to be an increased rate of depression for children in our care. Specifically from the ages of 11 to 18. When asked, a child suffering from depression will more often than not say to us that it is because they are not being able to socialize with their peers in the way they were before. A new development seen over the past 3 to 4 months has been an increase in the transfer of parental obligations and an emotional responsibility for the parent between the parents and the child, or parents and children, excuse me. As this period of social isolation continues, some children are placed in the role of decision makers for the household, co-parent to their siblings, and or primary emotional support to their very own parents.
Also during the MCCSC school board meeting, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and Operations, Dr. Andrea Mobley, said 12 out of 23 buildings with in-person learning have no reported COVID-19 cases.
To our knowledge, we do not have a situation where a positive individual has transmitted to another student or staff member in a classroom. But we've not seen it transmitted between students, from a student to a teacher, teacher to a student. We just have not seen that to our knowledge in any classroom up to this time. And we're hearing that also from our local health officials. We're hearing that from the state health officials, that we're not seeing the transmission in schools.
Mobley said any transmission most likely occurred in gatherings outside of schools. And we'll have more Cats Week after this message.
For hurting families in Monroe County.
A contribution to children who are vulnerable and in need of an advocate.
A staff that goes above and beyond to support and advocate for children in need of services.
The web of remarkable people who are dealing with difficult situations.
So many young people that are in need of help and trying to find a stable family, a stable place to live. Without the CASAs to make that happen, many of them would be unable to find a good home.
I love being that voice for the child who can't speak for themselves in court.
It takes me out of my comfort zone, and it also helps others.
CASA means supporting our community.
Being a CASA is making sure that your village is healthy and whole, and that the children in your village will someday be able to help the village as well.
A child who doesn't have a voice, maybe in their family situation or a school situation, now has a voice that can advocate for them.
I really
really enjoy working with children that are going through difficult times and letting them know that I care about their future.
We are privileged with our charge of representing the best interest of children. And so therefore we can advocate for exactly what they need without restriction, focusing on their best interest.
I want to repair the world one child at a time.
Welcome back to CATSweek. The Monroe County Commissioners heard a final validation report presentation on PreTrial Reform, Indiana. Assistant Chief Probation Officer Troy Hatfield presented PreTrial Reform goals during their October 27th meeting.
There are three main goals of pretrial reform that we focus on. Those are maximizing the release of pretrial defendants, maximizing safety, and maximizing court appearance. So in keeping those three things in mind, we really worked to set up our local system on how we were going to do things.
Hatfield said the program began 4 years ago. He said over 8,000 pretrial defendants were assessed.
We have in Monroe County an overall appearance rate of about 93%, meaning that of all the hearings a pretrial defendant has during their pretrial period, of all those hearings in the past 4 years, they have been attended or defendants have appeared 93% of the time. In terms of a safety rate, and what I mean by that is not having any new arrests during the pretrial period, you'll see that our overall kind of safety rate is 79%, but our low risk defendants appear for court 96% of the time, and 91% of the time are never rearrested for any new offenses during that pretrial period of time.
Hatfield said the assessment looked at the defendant's criminal histories, employment, residential stability, and substance abuse. Researcher and professor Dr. Evan Lauder reported good predictive validity for new arrests or failure to appear in Monroe County.
Individuals who are high risk relative to low risk have a 7 times greater likelihood of any FTA. Individuals who are high risk have a 17.56 times greater likelihood of any arrest relative to low risk defendants. And individuals who are high risk relative to those who are low risk have a 6.61 times greater likelihood of any new arrest. You see that those effect sizes are essentially tempered a little bit for moderate to low risk defendants, but still, I mean, good predictive accuracy and exactly what we would want to see in kind of assuming that moderate risk defendants are at higher risk of failing during that pretrial period relative to low risk, and the same for high-risk defendants relative to moderate risk.
Lauder stated the risk assessment had similar positive changes for both Black and white defendants. She reported the levels for release within 3 days evened out between both demographics. Lauder said disparities also shrank in the average number of days in pretrial detention.
Essentially, what we found is that defendants who were administered a pretrial risk assessment had a greater likelihood of release. That release typically came without financial conditions and in a shorter length of time. We found little evidence that there was a disparate impact of risk assessments by race. In contrast, Black defendants who received a risk assessment had 71% fewer days in pretrial detention compared to that pre-pilot comparison period. And white defendants experienced a 40% reduction.
Hatfield encouraged a decrease in the use of bond release conditions. He said further research would look into pretrial sanctions and incentives, graduated supervision in pretrial, and criminal justice. Public Works Director Adam Wason presented an East 3rd Street construction project to the Bloomington Board of Public Works on October 27th. Gillette Construction Manager Tom Rittman said major impacts would be seen on Grant Street.
We're wanting to close the parking lane next to the construction site for the duration of the project, and we will have a walk around in that parking lane during the majority of the construction. Then when we're working on that side of the building, which I think we've given you dates for each one of these steps of the project, when we're working on that side of the building, we will move the walk around out into the southbound lane and close the southbound lane as well. So that'll give us the staging area to unload wall panels, brick masonry, set up scaffold and so forth.
Rittman said Gillette worked out accessibility for surrounding businesses and residents. Board member Beth Hollingsworth asked Rittman about signage.
I wonder about signage. There's so many different closures and at different times. You will be taking care of signage for all of those things so that the public knows what to expect coming up.
Yeah, those were part of our exhibits as well. So we've got different signage for the different durations.
The closure will run from November 2nd to July 1st of 2021. The Monroe County Commissioners approved a one-day Black Lives Matter Bloomington training for elected officials. County Attorney Jeff Cockrell spoke about the costs during their October 28th meeting.
It's been determined that this will be a virtual meeting, which leads to a slight addition in cost. Also, since it's virtual, some of the insurance language didn't make as much sense. The liability for a online meeting is much less to nil than if it were to be an in-person meeting that they are performing at. The insurance requirements for, workman's comp and things have not changed, but just the liability insurance has changed for that reason. This is a training that is currently scheduled for January 30th for elected officials to go and be trained by Black Lives Matters on certain matters that they have expertise on, and that is the reason for the training.
Commissioner Julie Thomas mentioned the training would occur after the election to include newly elected officials. Commissioner Penny Githens said the total cost would be $6,250. Also during the commissioners' meeting, Cockrell proposed personnel policy handbook changes.
There are 3 changes to our policy, changes to our policy incorporated in this. One is to change sick leave to personal benefit time to give a little more flexibility in scheduling and use of the benefit time we give. The second is to change our bereavement time to make it coincide more with other major employers in the area and kind of give it a more understandable, I think, who gets what for when. And then the third was the training. We added some required training language, and I think we had gotten some feedback that may be somewhat problematic.
Cockrell said language was proposed to make more straightforward changes to the competent and inclusive workforce section of the handbook. He clarified the Board of Judges and prosecutor have not yet approved the language.
There are some trainings that everybody has to do, and those are the examples used in this are computer usage training and internal control trainings. I think also from time to time we have trainings that are requested by the insurance carriers that help keep our insurance rates down, and other kind of, I'm thinking sexual harassment training, things like that that are universally necessary in order for us to do those things. Those are ones that the Board of Commissioners can say, hey, we've got to do this because it either has a usage and at the end of the day, all these have a liability or state requirement behind it policy. Subject matter training are by the overseeing elected officials. The reason that is excluded from that the law enforcement is excluded from the second set is because that is a subject matter competency training for the law enforcement employee. They have to go through that, and the sheriff decides that. So in essence, that becomes under that clause.
The commissioners unanimously approved the policy changes. And we'll have more Cats Week after this message.
Let's talk about sex.
What is consent?
And what's not?
Consent is based on choice.
Consent is active, not passive.
Consent is giving permission without feeling pressure.
What is not consent?
Silence.
Passed out.
Intoxicated.
Fear.
It is not consent.
Got consent?
Ask.
Sex without consent is a crime. Only yes means yes.
Welcome back to Cats Week. At the October 28th Bloomington City Council Public Safety Committee meeting, Council member Jim Sims presented the establishment of a Community Advisory on Public Safety Commission.
This commission would, among other duties, research and make recommendations to the Common Council and the mayor on matters of public safety.
Sims mentioned 11 members would form the commission. Councilmember Isabel Piedmont Smith said the committee would contain many demographics.
And there are some demographic groups that don't have a seat at the table, especially when making decisions on public safety, even though issues of public safety affect them greatly due to various forms of bigotry, prejudice, and systemic bias. And so this is really a mechanism for us to hear those voices. We propose the formation of the Community Advisory on Public Safety Commission, CATS, to hear these voices, specifically their recommendations for improving public safety in our community.
Piedmont Smith stated the commission would review and propose successful programs from other communities and create new programs. She clarified the City Council Public Safety Committee would review all applicants and the council as a whole would vote on appointments. Board of Public Safety member Maquibe Reese brought up concerns of committee formation.
I wanted to say something as it relates to what Councilwoman Piedmont Smith mentioned. I hear her say that she wants to empower the people as it relates to including people at the table. However, in this CAPS commission, those individuals, Black, Indigenous, people of color, in their intersections, were not part of the conversation in creating this piece, this CAPS piece. And that's my number one concern, because not only do we, Black, Indigenous, people of color in their intersections, want a seat at the table, but we also want to create that table. And we want other people to join our table. And that's what I would suggest as what the additional initiatives are supporting, is us actually creating that table and encouraging people to join that seat at the table. And something that I share with all the sponsors, including the organizers, was my concern about not having people of color, Black, Indigenous, in their intersections as part of this conversation, and that it is considered white-centered.
Piedmont Smith said if she were to do it again, she would have included more demographics earlier. She stated law enforcement on the commission would drown out other voices.
Well, the police hold the power. The police, are funded, are trained, are armed. They hold the power, and we want to hear from people who don't hold power. So I think that power dynamic is the reason why it would prevent us from hearing from people who do not hold the power and who have been marginalized if we had people from the police on this commission.
Sims said he would rather see the commission begin as a focus group. Councilmember Kate Rosenbarger mentioned a safe space and sense of commitment is created with a commission as opposed to a focus group. Committee members will hold a second hearing on November 12th. The Bloomington City Council Transportation Committee discussed an ordinance to amend the municipal code during their October 28th meeting. Long-range planner Amir Farshi described the changes.
It adds some stop intersections, a new pedestrian hybrid beacon signal, and a new no parking zone. The ordinance deletes several loading zones that are no longer in existence, and the residential neighborhood zone 8, as that zone was absorbed by other zones by a previous ordinance. The ordinance corrects the time restrictions for one loading zone, and the ordinance clarifies that the Parking Services Division has the authority to begin the neighborhood parking permit sales process for the upcoming year at any time.
Councilmember Stephen Volan proposed an amendment to the ordinance.
So neighborhood zone 6 is Garden Hill. This is the zone between the stadium and 17th Street, and the railroad tracks rather. Stadium and the railroad tracks. And 17th Street is the northernmost border of Garden Hill. And there are a number of single family residences on 17 that have a 17th Street address, but thanks to the way that the zone was drawn, are excluded from the zone. It looks like the zone was gerrymandered because I guess at the time, the neighborhood, or I'm not sure who didn't think that those houses didn't belong. But I mean, they're clearly south of 17th Street, okay? And they're houses that should qualify under the current rules of neighborhood parking zones.
Volin stated any qualified address within the street boundaries could get a parking permit. Committee members unanimously recommended do pass on the ordinance as amended. Bloomington Utilities Director Vic Kelson proposed an amendment to Title 10 of the Bloomington Municipal Code regarding grease interceptors. He described the need during the October 28th City Council Utilities and Sanitation Committee meeting.
What happens is that the grease can accumulate and become solidified in pipes. And you may have seen some stories from there's cities in Europe and on the East Coast where they call them fatbergs. It's a gigantic blob of fat that plugs the sewer, and it costs a lot of money to dig that stuff out. When fog causes a sewer to be clogged up, we have to get out there with equipment and clean out the sewers. And especially downtown, that has been an issue, especially in the past. It's better now than it used to be, but it's still a problem. We still do get clogged sewers. When you get a clogged sewer, it can lead to sanitary sewer overflows and other kinds of problems. So we really don't want fog in the system.
Kelson clarified FOG stands for fats, oils, and grease. He said water treatment plants are harmed by fog. Kelson said grease interceptors prevent clogs.
We have used concrete grease interceptors. They're costly. They're also big, and you have to dig a big hole. And in Bloomington, when you dig a big hole, you often hit bedrock, which is extremely expensive. This has been an ongoing challenge for us and for our regulated community because it turns out to be pretty expensive to put one of these things in. So if you got a bar or a restaurant and you need to have a grease interceptor, you can be facing a really significant cost.
Kelson said new plastic grease retention tools would be cheaper, last longer, and be easier to bury. He mentioned consistent cleaning regulations would also prevent grease buildup.
What the program will require is training at no cost for any waste haulers who want to service food service establishments in Bloomington, and it will also improve our data reporting.
Assistant Director of Environmental Programs James Hall said a tracking software is used to observe food service industries cleaning records. Kelson said collected grease goes into a lagoon at the Dillman Water Treatment Plant. Committee members unanimously recommended do pass. And that is all for Cats Week. Thank you for joining us. For Cats and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.